managed without rules limiting its basic concerns of the Wild West. Alternative concept of the commons, no individual owns a property, offers a worker over operation, cost management, allows actual use of resources while preventing spoliation, devolution, PCT is effectively censored, direct public interest, CBR, infinite malleability, private interest, invasive adverse impacts, only PD, demonstrated ability to adapt equals, open access to resident treaties using the PD will lead to durable equitable management, and exemptions devastate regulation credibility. The OSD proves that Hickman and Dolman are too. The decision of an important state down to a regime putting treaty into the entire treaty for those who remain good international law must be subject to assessment by major states of the 21st century. That is one defection would lead to effective class that the remaining states here in the United States are unlikely to use coercion necessary to reinforce the regime and the advantage of sustainable space development. Implementing the PTT for private appropriation results in legally binding regimes that curbs unsustainable development interests, closing illegal loopholes. That's Babcock 19. PTT offers a bunch of managing open access to commons based on the sovereign holds it for common properties just for the free use of the public right to access never lost. The government or private individuals can alienate those resources unless we're comparable public person resort part of attack on property doctrine place offer PTT safeguard for long-term preservation to serve the benefit of the general public. PTT protects the people's competition, scope application doctrine product predictive research passive use perpetual issues public access can be evoked by anyone useful as management to an space no server apparatus required to implement highly adaptable and innovative different needs for PTT must suited to keep order in space. The PTT will be allowed development ensure it will not be used for profitable free but also sustainable and equitable and sustainable development embedded in law, social security, debris traffic, and SSA. That's all going up in GT 16. Space sustainability ensure that all humans continue to use energy for peaceful purposes of long-term business around humanity possesses capacity to ensure sustainability, defining good societies, protecting behavior, sustainability, interchangeably, security, access to SSA, protection, responsible uses. The more companies defend a space, more the rules of procedure, compliance mechanisms, to minimize responsible space behavior, to delay interference, debris mitigation, removal of traffic management, enhancing transparency, cooperation. Rules of all sustainability, security is not adequately speak sustainability, so it requires aligning space law with sustainable development paradigm, sustainability, cross calls for conscious engagement with social environment, legal frameworks, and conscious station, Chris Rival, Orbis, that's Fabian 19. Ubiquitous technology yields over granting over 300,000 objects capable of unconscious worse and evidence of nearly doubling of satellites. Increasing relation to proportional tripling of debris with tenfold increase of a cloud will be cascaded until threshold is increased. It also satellite with benefits being destroyed, accumulation of radar orbits and usable over survivors, and that triggers missile radars. That's 215. Obvious challenges of surveillance false alarms came with the missiles radar, such as catalog filter, normal passage of missiles, and also not perfect. The use of collision risk on plan maneuverage, operation reliability depends quality and quantity of data. Not a free source operation depend on whether the satellite starts a great challenging warning. Collision exploded at more than 200 breakups and nuclear war. That's Rockaway 15. Early warning spotting launch of missiles that bring Armageddon. There was a constellation scanning first launch. If launch is rejected, the would retaliate. We called it within an hour. There could be any humanity information would immediately be data linked to the ground and independently debris hits on satellites causes Russia war. That's the whistle for Russia talks the pleasure recurrence of research and operated the Moscow may use this preemptively. What would happen if we were to hit a Russian early one satellite? The Russian would make a judgment called the United States not maintain a system that would allow us to routine debris strike or attack the military nation during crisis to interpret the worst case when information flows disrupted by attack acts as the result of escalation and unchecked commercial appropriation causes space conflicts. That's the Perez 21. Geopolitical power to determine if any commercialization resources are permitted commercial utilization linked to escalation of national competition over resources and national peace and security. The significant drawbacks of commercialization, space exploration, states with financial competition, geopolitical competition over structural resources and as well peace and security to access conflict of interest may arise. Not just Moscow return to the expansion of strategy lead to nuclear wars with the production of space private enterprises but unstable legal factors that is employed geopolitical competition, increasing commercial outer space, there's a limited exploitation of resources claimed to property with function detail. This resort to military force protect assets, potential wars, immense only remedy expressly regulate commercial activities and space war causes nuclear war. That's Gallagher 15. As space capabilities have become integral elements of modern military operation, explored whether anti-attack and military defense decrease the risk of nuclear wars. Almost certainly no United States and Russia and China have kinetic anti weapons because the United States defense heavily on space military subordinate for extras will try to neutralize just advantage of attacking satellites and nation launch attack satellites would require nuclear retaliation would irrational but powerful country respond to action when attack anti-satellite weapons could contribute to nuclear war deterrence affiliate would increase if U.S. leaders become present that Russia preparing an anti-satellite attack pressure could build for preemptive attack and nuclear war cause extinction and outweighs other existential risks as PND 16. If the others don't launch, it will still make the world uninhabitable, reduce the global famine, less attack as nuclear work, reduce nuclear winter, self-destruction, destruction of all nuclear work, reduce smoke and last ice, old allowed ultraviolet radiation, predict ultra production would decline by 20%. All humans and other species of nuclear weapons use certain human survivors and BDC that even climate change does not. And a single high altitude explosion will ignite the atmosphere in a fusion change reaction that causes extinction that's abolished in 18. There was a note in zero science that might ignite the atmosphere if you heat the hydrogen potential cloud and underground fusion become greater. The atomic bomb produce efficient the air. Those reactions are more than so one across the entire atmosphere. Even the reaction to stop the earth shock and radioactive contamination becoming catastrophic on a worldwide scale. And planetary explosion previous tests don't disagree because they didn't use neutron nukes, which are getting developed now. That's Chalco 3. Also requires a bit of neutron bombs to radioactive hydrogen generate nutrients in the process cause more or heat the far greater than natural energy involved in delay test not actually with attachment activity every year or nuclear test to increase the size of activity change in modern nuclear weapons global warfare nuclear planetary interior cause the entire planet to explode and satellite collapse ensures nuclear miscalculation. That's Johnson 14. Satellite used by military to maintain speeds average they can hide what they're doing and military infrastructure nature attacks diminish not only worse both sides from now they're being attacked by the astral war was likely security of countries depend on space satellites should we lose access space lives will be at risk using nuclear war would increase our military's ability to react would be reduced and the Kessler syndrome ensures cascading impact satellites of every impact including military readiness internet and space weather that supports C-15. Kessler shouldn't be considered forms that breathe any other thing in class ways include satellites can deny that instigate disruption to technology existence dramatic reduction ability to mitigate information conduct transactions and actual concentrated traffic hundreds of millions of internet connection with advanced disruption can affect the power loss of military capabilities basic critical enable U.S. warfare and back from the U.S. military drones military ground units but on satellites to monitor space weather such as incoming space storms and primacy assaults armed forces land grabs rogue states and great power war tactical defense that ignores emerging instability and compounding risks as brands 18. Since World War II For much privacy, freelance, available power projection capability, region, Europe, Asia, the Middle East, converting into return to the multi-stable, multiplayer of the earlier liberal political views, opening international economy, suppressing international scourges, work states, nuclear proliferation, terrorism, neither filter, prior injury, right, honestly, famous promise, road alliances would lose her ability to reach would road rivals, be emboldened, national cards will be under stress, military competitions, back China, Russia, seeking regional hegemony, modernization, emphasize nuclear, beyond development, new power projection, North Korea's nuclear arsenal, or on the works more capable of democratization, technology, more actors and content, American security, anti-Semitic, except for capable technology, capable as between American and our officers closely, engaged fast number of challenges, multiply the more perverse conditions have been made change, the work states, the radiation, theory is more derivers, rate that on the United States, the space, law more same challenge more than Thomas a quarter century, and the standard is maximize these mental being prefer one pleasure and pain to seek value, disvalue everything else regresses, robust neuroscience, blue modality. Pleasure finds reward, do well, good rewarding, by participating in the reward, organs of evolution, every competition, rewards in case fitness foods means it's an option rewarding, many modulate pleasure, the opposite, like something represented by a reason limit system, nurture, there's there's micro contrast in nurturers, every the way more developed human, players will lubricate to rewards that are your way, second death is bad, net way, age, you can't act for football, security, which is every other good, be sure to self skills, nature, ability about the ethics, life is your protection, psychic shape, we can't reach an end goal of ethics without life.
Okay. Are you good for cross?
Mm-hmm.
Sweet. Why is current debris insufficient to causing the Kessler effect?
Sorry, say it again.
Status quo debris. Why does it not cause the Kessler effect?
Yeah, right now orbits are not like completely congested to the point where states are able to maneuver around things. For example, different like different aircraft, like different commercial systems that exist in like places like the LEO still have the ability to like predict the debris and move out of it. But in a world in which like sort of orbits get so congested because the amount of debris there is just so much that they're not able to move around these pieces of debris, that would trigger a scenario.
Sweet. That makes sense. I guess how much debris is needed to trigger the Kessler effect?
We don't think it would. I don't think it would take that much more, considering the fact that like there's already like small scale, like what's it called, destruction of satellites, or like there's already been like penetrations and things like the ISS, and they already have to make like 4 or 5 maneuvers every single month. That are like I think it's probably relatively close by the time that like these orbits get really congested and cascades.
I guess why do public satellites not cause the same impacts?
Well, public satellites are like very limited in scale. Like the amount of like public satellites that go up, or like it's not like comparable to like a commercial free for all where you have like
Wait,
hundreds
but
of different satellites.
you just said
Constellation.
not a lot of them are. You said not a lot of satellites are needed to cause the impacts. Why are small
So
amounts?
that's like you're misreading what I'm saying. I'm saying that the amount of like satellites that are already there are like are what's called not that much by the public sector. Like the public sector doesn't really like produce like a ton of satellites because there's no need to. The reason why a ton of satellites are there is for like internet, things like that are all done by the private sector. There's like a couple of, but they're really not that much. Second is that I don't think our scenario is really dependent on debris getting created from satellites. It's debris getting created from like commercial uses of outer space, the production of mega constellations, other things like that, which orbits and clutters up debris or clutters up orbits. It's not really from like the satellites itself. That would be after a cascade.
The Hoots evidence says like there are a ton of objects in space now that would trigger missile radar systems, but the missile defense system, the missile like radars it's talking about are from like 1950s. I guess why are status quo missile radar systems not the same?
Wait, sorry. Why are they not the same?
Or sorry, why are they different?
Wait, our argument is that they are like the same missile radars. Like they're still using missile radar. Like I'm kind of confused by the question. Like they're not. They are the same.
Why are status quo missile radars? Why would they react the same way as missile radar systems from the 1950s?
Yeah, because it's impossible to detect whether or not a satellite or a collision, what's called in outer space, because of the way that debris functions. You can't attribute who exactly did it or things along those lines to whether or not that was an intentional or non-intentional attack, which incentivizes states to preemptively escalate.
Your evidence also says that there are like programs that detect, track, and identify artificial objects in Earth orbit. Why are they
the issue with these programs, for like all the stuff I explained a little bit ago about like the ability to even maneuver around these things, or like the ability to just move around debris, is limited. Like all these situations, like the ability to predict that debris is coming requires you to move around the debris and go in somewhere else in the orbit, but it doesn't assume a world where the orbit just isn't able to be moved around it.
Okay. The order is case, but you'll need 5 sheets. And then some stuff in the actual like half page. So I guess technically 6. I sent it. There also might be an option this time, but I doubt it. So
I'm good.
Hedge, Adam.
I'm good.
Case of solvency section, massive public sector all cost PTD expansions, only temporary solution. The plan kills private sector innovation. Westwood inserts blue 1AC, back 19. Then they kill development incentives and infinite malleability. Ensure circumvention. No one area terms. The PTD solves development step. Pursuing the PTD that includes private property, which isn't the app, or they're extra topical, which is a voting issue for limits because they're infinite things they can defend on top of the resolution. Kill negative ground. Westwood insert blue 1AC, back 19. And the app is insufficient for space sustainability. They're not a radical reconceptualization sustainable, but the same dominant conceptualization. Their evidence criticizes. Westwood inserts blue 1AC, Argonaut and GLC 16. The space force stuff. Elmer needs to cut more cars for y'all massive public all cause, or they're massively extra topical and their evidence destroys the app. Westwood blue 1C or inserts blue 1C Perez. 21 the congestion. Internal link, their internal link is about space surveillance in the 50s, not modern SSN. Even if status quo tracking is imperfect, it's good enough to not trickle misrators. You should hold the line. Their warrant is one line that says the phrase once. Westwood inserts blue 1C. Hoots 15 the roadway evidence is terrible. One double blind. It's about ICBM launch, which the SNR isn't, or the app gets rid of early warning signs because they're unfair appropriation of outer space, which makes the impacts inevitable too. It says there's a 30-minute reaction time for counter launch. That's enough time for double checking retaliation. This scenario is not miscalculated. Active retaliation, holding to a higher explanation for how conflict happens than 2-second blip at the top of the 1 year. Skip the hedge stuff for now. I'll come back to that later. The Russia stuff. If they win an internal link to Russia war, it's good. Russia's modernizing to surprise nuclear hemp attack in the United States prior. 135 Supreme Peace, Russia weapons, Supreme Peace, obviously offensive nation, G7 significantly reduces visibility. US early warning silence and radar, also reducing arrival time. The major for Russian hypersonic voices as a nuclear president, force general, then chief of the US strategic command, the voice, vice chairman, JCS agrees for hypersonic vehicles fly on 50 to 100 kilometers up from hydroburst for Supreme P warheads, a new avenue for super surprise nuclear hemp attacks, and that ionizes Van Allen, destroys all stats prior. 20 nuclear detonation phase risking gamma rays, so atmospheric nuclear detonation hemp can also damage the other pump of the Van Allen ionized particle ionization. Van Allen belt is much bigger than they have attack use a high yield weapon. Shoot the skies of US satellites and increased ionization prevents baseball Baker. 14 Van Allen environment spiritual weapon injection damage satellites and use for disturbances so powerful Earth experience solar systems. Spacecraft damage for radiation circumstances zero penetrate shielding. Destroy spacecraft fly through the environment with the hostile belts winning intensity. Space mosquito bird extinctions Archidacus. 19 endless colonies were established in space. The human race would become extinct phenomena beyond control. Meteor Earth. Nova. Our sun self-destruct species. Ultimate insurance. Our solar system provides several habitats to be stepping stone beyond. And Russia wars good. We go first. Would win cause minimal damage. They'd surrender. Also, 19 objectives pursued with a nuclear conflict with no damage limitation to counterforce operations. Only option checks against command and control the conjunction with BMT ensure damage limitation. The US increase accuracy and remote sensing have increased the potency low casualty counterforce options are possible for the first time. Believe that active weapons would be ideal, but its damage likely to be limited. Well, the enemy must be broken by destroying ability to resist the conditions under which nukes could be used. Russia launch attack on either the US or one of its allies. The econ turn they link insert blue 1 Dvorsky 15 and the collapse is inevitable. Growth causes accidental disease and warming independently national space military inevitable foster 19 capitalism the failed stagnation financial inequality equal to death by institutions the point of cost levels which inevitably burst antibiotics with capital activists leading to ABR crisis reports increasing deaths and inflection dungeons public for prison the military 2 million beyond bars constituting new Jim Crow new space work militarization space climate destabilization climate change certification distribution nitrogen phosphorus also freshwater disappearance of forest toxic chemical radioactive pollution 60% wildlife vertebrate population hot house or the climate will be locked in irreversible energy corporations Idaho climate change breakthrough climate denial excellent extraction reserves and growth is unsustainable cause extinction dukes and coke 17 growth is internal optimistic engineering GTP increase deeper industrialization natural disaster generates waste distributing systems with human functioning short term you are decrease reducing incentives to invest in the recovery people while demand increases would impact their growth climate change and may accelerate within the future growth then was also water and forest ecosystem service purification air mitigation threats and floods each with pollination pest control recent research identified there should be on which life on earth will be at risk and developing alternative models that do not depend on the greatest urgency growth and stability of earth to support life and economic crisis spikes widespread movements towards local sustainability trainer mention transfer functions from state to the local radical restructuring be smooth and peaceful even by recognition that scarcity making self-governing the only option the eco village is achieving sustainability global crisis greater than oil the economy dependent on petroleum possible by debt capacity to export will drive is unlike a transition to begin unless there's a breakdown in a capital system discontent muted Goldilocks outcome be expression to it would be the depression that enough to convince that the system is not going to provide increasing numbers of things to replacing capitalism localism simpler race cultural revolution is likely to be a local level the goal must be transition that involves lower research success so small scale economies committed to the frugal lifestyles of ordinary people coerced by scarcity deterioration and restructuring the debris stuff debris creates existential deterrence of raising the bar for conflict international norms Vail Miller 731 debris creates a deterrent on actors who might otherwise violate norms and strike out artists capabilities and hostilities distribute can increase future cost of aggressor even industrial attack succeeds or removing danger delivery weaken restraint so deterrence making ease test and hostile action more likely international norms seem to be in decline degrees of deterrence does not relate important order credibility in space 3 creates existential deterrence in 2 Brown 18 the ubiquity of Brown 18 the ubiquity of space and pressure for fragility space creates existential deterrence of destruction space and pressure maybe intuitively escalatory then natural constant explosive agents render Earth orbit unusable for everyone China on military economy relying on outer space and no miscalc degree hit stations all the time Kane 15 to 21,000 bits of junk 500,000 particles and 100 million the whole station's home over time
Washington, D.C., and S because of damage. Then turn SSA causes water shortages. Westwood, Yellow, Loper, 19 severe space weather, water and wastewater shortages due to reduce or limiting conflict from power grid failure and resource conflicts and population economic scarcity creates cooperation, diffuses conflict broadly burner. 20 societies respond with cooperation. Empirical research helps the water shifts to cooperative negotiations and management conflict mentioned conclusive findings, income of population, the measure best predictors in conflict, value from 1948 to 2008 states direction, cooperation and conflict, and precise data water precondition, shortages force the shift to sustainable agriculture. Hayden, 21 drink the drought overpumping, drought of wells, one result reality of adjusting to increased scarcity, significant amount of irrigated ag land will shift to less intensive agri taken out of production, farmers repurposing irrigated land, create new uses benefits include habitat corridors for wildlife and industrial ag with insect population cause extinction timber, 20% is declining, include escalated overshooting critical boundaries, action desperately needed to curb decline vital to food web nutrient cycling and industries if invertebrates are disregarded that the human species the last month it's horrifying declines are linked to intensification of ag, the direct targeted pesticides use we might make ourselves like things depending on how fast we hit a dire impacts of pushing earth past the planetary boundaries ahead stuff collapse inevitable fire 17 maintains the U.S. position global powers untenable effective resistance over U.S. hesitation to bench American leverage perceptions of ground over uncertain while the U.S. still clings to political economic military leverage is increasingly exhibiting less reach durability and endurance global order in the U.S. is under enormous stress current international order and not self-sustainable eventually collapse powers such as China, Russia, Iran, North Korea demonstrate counter U.S. competition vulnerable its falling victim forces directly challenge political authority the rules are falling the units struggling to keep up and allies are losing faith in American leadership. China will take over the global hegemony here 18 American will lose dominant powers except the rules the U.S. has set down problems China is starting to assert itself as a regional power display of force and oppressing and political liberalization and both China got the challenge to run the country to weaker position due to damage to American empire cultural dominance hegemony related countries that Trump alienated allies by denigrating NATO threatening a trade war and nuclear faith and leadership plummeted sharply token destroy allies fighting American combined with growing ambition China can destabilize and hegemony is terribly unsustainable causes and it's because of laundry list of existential threats always on recency wall 19 U.S. leaders try to remake global politics according to liberal hegemony results of failed wars financial crisis staggering inequalities trade alliances and unbolded adversity circumstances go to dangers got confidence super sick fantasy long global war and terror causing failure shadow U.S. invincibility Middle East and broad conflict trigger wars economic crisis a crisis in energy population movement democracy is in retreat worldwide tapper these failures of liberal hegemony obligations to only research joke containment force the U.S. to keep NATO with Beijing committed Washington defend weak members for U.S. regime change encourage states to pursue nuclear deterrent thousands of dead civilians magnified staggering wealthy U.S. defending wealthy allies choosing terrorists across Africa and still giving support to problematic Middle Eastern clients. I'll read topicality interpretation private entities excludes government up cancel donate private entity any organization not government affiliate violation the act requires banks government for alien research for non-public just for purposes when I see back the government or private interest get alien research unless for public purposes but negative limits interpret just act any government for purposes with spirits or court up country or private entities specific to security unique national purpose started private unlimited topic incentive to apps next will have private limits or keep reciprocal prepper.
Okay, let me start cross. You read everything, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. The water scenario, you read a re-highlighting of a card we didn't read in the 1AC. How does this link?
I read the one. You've read evidence as to why debris causes like solar flares. Yeah, I read the evidence.
Oh, okay,
right.
So you read the full
evidence.
thing? Okay,
yeah,
cool.
The yellow highlighting.
Research, or so wait, just the yellow highlighting or like
yeah.
the full thing? Okay,
just the yellow highlighting.
Just the yellow highlighting. Wait, then what's the internal link then? Because this evidence just says severe space weather, water, and waste shortages due to reduced. If you only read yellow,
the Dvorsky evidence. When I see Dvorsky evidence says that satellites solve every impact, including space weather. We've made an argument that space weather solar weather causes water shortages, which is a good thing.
Okay.
You read the link evidence. We just read the intro.
Okay. The econ scenario, I guess this like or actually not the econ scenario, the Russia scenario. Why would, or it seems like your prior evidence is talking about about how they would fire like these like EMP attacks at satellites, or I guess combination with the prior evidence, and it would fire them at like these satellites. If the United States doesn't have satellites that exist, why would they fire them?
Obviously, the plan doesn't get rid of public military satellites.
That's not the question. That's not my question. Like you're misunderstanding the question. Just answer the question. Why would they fire satellite? Why would they fire like EMP blasts at a world in which we don't have satellites?
Presuming a world where no satellites isn't the aft.
Okay, whatever. Fine. I'm just asking you to answer like if you just answer like a hypothetical scenario in which we don't have
satellites. Evidence indicates that Russia is modernizing and creating a nuclear EMP attack to launch it at the United States. That's good because they think that it's good because it reduces the visibility of U.S. early warning satellites and radars, which reduces arrival time, which increases the risk that their hypersonics can first strike the United States, which is something that the prior evidence isolates. Obviously, the plan does not get rid of things like DoD satellites or like Pentagon satellites, or you prove the violation on extra T, which I don't think does you any good.
The debris scenario, why does debris create deterrence?
Yeah, so the Miller evidence, I think, explains this. Debris resulted from destroyed satellites or other space objects created a deterrent effect on actors who might otherwise violate international norms and strike at objects in space to test their capabilities or act with hostility. It creates a sort of like risk that the things that they launch into space could be destroyed, i.e., things like ASAT tests. ASATs could be destroyed by debris in space. That creates deterrence and just incentivizes militarization, which solves the impact of the act.
Okay, the water scenario, why is, I guess, or actually, it's fine, whatever. The congestion stuff, or sorry, the like solvency rehighlighting, this like AF is insufficient to sustainability. Can you explain like what the rehighlighting is saying?
Yeah, so your evidence says that sustainability requires a broader discussion and solutions aimed towards aligning space law and policy with the sustainable development paradigm. Your evidence also says that the AF is not sufficient and doesn't do that. It says that it requires like a broad overarching objective that may not be achievable, which probably takes out the AF. But independently, it also says that there are different countries that depend on space for a growing area purposes, which probably proves that public sector would just do it inevitably.
Sure. I'll start. Okay, I have like 4 seconds left. The orders, the AF, or it'll be like the AF, like advantage solvency page. Then it'll be topicality. Then it'll be like all the impact terms.
The impact terms just top down.
Yeah.
Do you have a new doc or no?
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, I need to plug in my computer. Give me 1 second.
Okay, the doc set.
I'm good.
Okay.
I'm good too.
Extend the advantage of the public construction solves unsustainable commercial space development, ensures action adequate private actors don't impede on the public good. That's all space situation, awareness, space security, resource wars, and debris, all of which culminate in nuclear power company extinction. We outweigh and control the internal to all their scenarios. Russia war good, hedge good, econ war, water shortages all require the destruction of satellites in the first place. But if we win, the original destruction kills everyone. The devote after sustainability and outer space solves public decreation by incentivizing cleanup efforts like ADR incentive, which solves all causes, and there is an impact to private sector innovation. We are extra two. We only reduce private actor approach in accordance with the public, and this would de-link out of all your impact turns anyways. Plus, brief out is good kid after otherwise the naked set up all affluence, which would win off a risk of politics. Topicality show. Plan text in the vacuum solves all their offense. None of these violations are based off the one is the plan text to be defended direct direction of just private appropriation, which means error AF solvency deficits solve all their offense. Second is that the AF doesn't get rid of public entities. You have many uniqueness claim that private entities are the ones that are appropriating resources, which means that the logical consequences of that is that public entities would also reduce it because the only reason why they're doing it is because of the private sector. And we don't defend sustainable size activities. We think sustainable space is a consequence of the affirmative, which is no difference from an ILA legitimacy advantage. And grant us the RBI for skew one, the time for 20 years. Split the 200 protected tour from a 6-minute class B prevents the neg infinitely splitting the 1 year with under the risk shells. They didn't justify RBI's bad in the 1 year, the 1 and 2, which means you should draw a line. Then prevent new 200 arguments. The case page again, the starting on hedge. Hedge collapse is not inevitable. Hundreds of years of peace can't be explained to your evidence. Only U.S. primacy prevents rogue proliferation, escalation, great power wars, through lack of alliance credibility. The challenges to U.S. primacy don't disprove that's all. It is still able to maintain future things and alliance commitments. Allies aren't alienated by it and has reassured commitments, which also right now the best studies confirm our impact. I'll send these cards after. Err on the side of consensus of empirical research. Our evidence assumes every skeptic that's Booker's in World War 16. U.S. security commitments to shape the strategic environment. Some results receive Roberts or alliance that deter effective studies spanning 2 centuries. Alliance lower conflict forward. Double choose enhance the defective easier to defend the challenges. Alliances with nuclear arms or something like later capability to Hamlin far less effective deterrence filling recognize these findings. You guys have done the world satellite society to intervene later pushes to go now to include the security guarantees reduce proliferation risk for was the only lots of doubt which protects the United States key reasons scholars or we're using by ultimate methods the guarantees of engagement or why like companies reaching out the government can be relied on warning system all fail and official planning will find the missiles will fly. Deterrence only work by raising the risk of nuclear war. The more nuclear arms states the greater the probability of nuclear years and pursuit is inevitable. Decline causes global war. That's Beckley 15. A take when destroy great powers can dictate the terms of security and allies and avoid overextension of the U.S. and take one suggests engagement with military strength with security case over research time not been telling but for the pension to American leaders define national interest defensively disengaging maybe unless U.S. directly leaving out with the partners and those interventions go away. The Russia war good page 1 AF controls the internal link to Russia war good. All your evidence about Russia wanting to fire weapons at satellites, but if they don't exist and they wouldn't have reason to fire them, which means that debris controls the internal links. This massive cascades would destroy every single system. Second, they wouldn't surrender. Putin cares too much about public opinion, wouldn't always pursue wars and see sort of his whole entire populace sort of views him as strong because he's able to sort of take a strong anti-American sentiment and strong American second strike relies on precision capabilities. But you can see the one I see divorces evidence that relies on satellites to debris controls the internal link and strikes fail. That's Skirts 9-6. Plans to upgrade the nuclear arsenal does not include Russia. They say these are last year heart used by Russia. Therefore, this has to be 61 not be able to complete exploding the hundreds. This has to be rocket to protect Russia's mountain or underground centers in the what's it called in Russia and the econ page 1. Absolute decoupling is possible and happening now. That's House Feather 21. Coal and structural decline, clean energy, solar power, falling down in oil, demand falling consumer safety, long been experiencing relative decoupling emissions per GDP falling for 60 years. Even India, China undergoing rapid exploration. The world is on track to absolutely decouple emissions. CO2 emissions depicted unlike decreases in more absolute decoupling with accompanied by CO2 emissions. 51 countries have absolutely decoupled emissions for tax risk and consumption and growth is sustainable. Physical limits are absolute or chronically underinvested, and resource use is declining now. That's Bailey 18. Because the Balthunius American transfers all boundaries one program Haitian versus all indicated countries higher life transfers boundaries antiquity and workers making their boundaries relevant energy costs are below reactors supply all carbon free energy costs not to hand. There's 260 years total over 1,140 years in a way to manage shortage costs. Use of maintaining the technological inefficient stable started resistant salient crops has reached park farm of the fertile hectares be short farming will place developments the price system mechanism for innovators growth price technology lift our party left any footprint rather than degrowth the planet will need more and the debris scenario no deterrence speeds research scenarios since infrastructure is what gets destroyed in the first place then states escalates they have no barrier to war which is the one to see Johnson evidence past debris hits don't dispute evidence is limited in scale and doesn't assume maneuverability that's possible in the status quo the water scenario that you didn't read it internally to and you sort of only read the yellow thing which is not enough to sort of trigger the entire thing second is that if we win anything on the DDEF phase and it's also so deep it's here proves that sort of our agricultural and our industrial systems are terminally sustainable which means it begs the question of all the DDEF debate because we're able to decouple now and we have more efficient solutions in the future.
Sweet. 5 minutes.
Oh, let me send the cards.
Actually, I'll just start when you said after I get it.
All right, there's.
Yeah, I'm downloading. Okay, 5 minutes. Or 5 minutes. It'll be like, I guess, the RVI and then case starting with the debris stuff.
Can you repeat after the RVI?
Yeah, debris and then the advantage. I guess I'll answer like the hedge bad stuff or hedge good stuff on the advantage page.
Okay, good.
Is everyone good? Sweet.
Top level no RBIs are incentivized baiting where the better theory debate will just be will be abuse debate theory and which will always win the RBI, which turns to sort of skew arguments. Two skew is inevitable. Skew is inevitable. Reading 5 days means that skew is inevitable. There's no reason why it's unique to top theory. 3 is that there's no terminal impact. Terminal impact RBIs are still you shouldn't win for proving your topical. 4 is that next can split the one year anyway, which just the dissent, etc. Underdeveloped dissent and impact turns means there's no unique offense. Why you need to run on T? You can just do things like impact turn generate offense externally. 4 is that we just criticize the way if you're extra topical means it's sort of, it should serve as sort of a broad debate means you shouldn't win for proving your topical the case. Going for the debris stuff, debris creates existential deterrence by raising the fear of conflict. It creates a deterrent effect on revisionist action, which flips uniqueness negative and proves that militarization or conflict is inevitable, means that it's tried for deterrence. It also increases the cost of aggression, solves transition wars. It means that there's no impact to decrease in readiness because no one would strike because of the risk of hitting debris and space debris. Also increases nuclear restraint, which solves the sort of impact of the affirmative, solves the terminal impact of the affirmative, and decreases ASAT test, which solves space militarization. That means that there's it's try or die negative independently. They've dropped the circumvention warrants and the rollback arguments. Norms are in decline, means that there's no incentive for states like China or Russia to abide by the plan proven by you've dropped that they're revisionist, means that they have an incentive, but their own self-interest and self-interest means that they have an incentive to expand outwards, which is drop uniqueness argument from the one and drop uniqueness evidence from the one and see that the durable field doesn't solve because the question of the efficacy of the plan. You have to defend the strength of the plan. That's key topic education and depth of discussion that outweighs education, outweighs fairness. 8 points only terminal impacting big points that we care about what we learn about the fair 3 is that there's no sort of incentive to why no reason it doesn't make durable field doesn't make sense in context. It's not a question of you getting the fiat whether or not the plan happens or what plan happens. I'll concede that you get the fiat of it, not that it stays durable fiat doesn't defend that independently. The fragility of space creates existential returns because of value to public governments, which independently solves the affirmative because of restraint and launches, which is the Bowen evidence that makes them because debris renders the Earth orbit unusable for everyone, which cautions countries like China from excessive kinetic intercept missions because of its own military and economies increasing reliance on outer space, which sort of solves there's sort of any risk of the link to DF because it proves that there's a risk or because countries don't have incentives or want supply. So concede that regret is sustainable, but that proves the risk of the deterrence impact. And they also drop that there's no miscalc, means that they don't get access to an internal, which is a Kane evidence because debris hit stations all the time. There are 21,000 bits of junk in space already, and also 500,000 particles, and 100 million of them that are smaller than 1 centimeter. Proves that things like space stations and satellites are always pummeled by Chinese space junk, but there's no terminal impact here. They line by line proper. They say that we misread the scenario because the infrastructure will get destroyed. We sort of impacted that so that infrastructure doesn't get destroyed, but even if it does get destroyed first, it creates a deterrence factor where states don't want to continually manifest means that even if infrastructure is destroyed in the short term, the long-term barriers to war means that they don't, and so don't go to war. Solves the sort of long-term barrier stuff. They say that states escalate, but we've read defense to why they wouldn't escalate because of the infrastructure getting destroyed, which is dropped and proves that it's terminally non-unique. They say that passive hits don't disprove their evidence, but it does. They say it's limited in scale. Sure, it's limited, but it proves that there's no sort of bright line or no bright line to what constitutes or how much debris is necessary for them to trigger the impacts. Means should err negative, but dropping the circumvention stuff is pretty damning. It means that even if they win, the debris doesn't hit circumvention. It's still offense against the circumvention stuff. The solvency section proper here is a circumvention that warrant. They have dropped that the infinite malleability, the PTT ensures circumvention. They've conceded that they are not allowed to answer this in the one year because the sort of development stuff presumes that a PTT includes private property, which isn't the app. They say that PTT is their evidence. The one to see back evidence that PTT is a gap filling placeholding approach, and until a regulatory regime is adopted, proves that it's insufficient to solve all of the impacts. Means that it's only a short-term plug-in solution that can't resolve the long-term issues that they solve. It means it's try or die for deterrence. They say the evidence also creates a massive public sector outcomes because it says that the government can alienate for public purposes. Proves that governments can just say that they want something for a public purpose and then just hire a private company to mine it, but under the blanket of public something, or just adopt those. Means that their impacts are inevitable. The malleability of the doctrine means that governments can also just change what the doctrine applies or how it applies in specific scenarios. They can use it to justify things like astro mining in a specific specific scenario, which grants them the ability to take advantage of it. It means that it doesn't resolve with the Russian war stuff. I'll concede no second strike means it doesn't. There's no impact to it. No impact to the response. Yeah, you don't hijack the internal link to Russia or Russia war good because it's a question of Russia developing technology and Russia having an incentive. Dropping Russia revisionist means it takes out the risk of you getting access to an internal link. You don't turn the impact. They say there's no incentive for them to exist absent it, but you concede revisionism, which proves that they have an incentive absent any reason, which means that the app isn't specifically key. The hedge debate, this is the only sort of possible terminal impact they can go for, but we're already winning reasons to resolve the internal links to it and turn the internal links to hijack it, which proves that there's no sort of terminal impact to it. They say other than the challenges to supremacy don't disprove that it's able to maintain things, but that's false. There are so many challenges in the status quo that the wall evidence proves that proves that it's not sustainable independently, causes massive amounts of tons of impacts. It's caused things like failed wars, financial crises, and returns all of their impacts. It causes massive amounts of things like terrorism, etc., which is all of the sort of impact scenario. It means that it recreates all of their impacts, proves that it's try or die negative independently. The sort of fantasy that it creates deterrence is probably false because it feels dangerous sort of overconfidence. Means just to serve as a epistemological way in which you frame their evidence. Their evidence presumes that the hegemony is always true and always creates a deterrent factor, which it doesn't because they've upset it in this specific grounds, proves that it's try or die negative for deterrence. The evidence that they read in the 1AR they say best studies confirm their impact that group both of the cards are evidence post-states. The wall evidence post-states it proves that pursuit isn't inevitable and collapse, but rather a collapse is inevitable because the sort of things like other countries rising, i.e. China rise, Chinese increase in economic power, etc., and Chinese revisionism broadly all expands Chinese power, proves that collapse is inevitable, assumes the warrants in your evidence. It's a comprehensive study stuff doesn't apply, it's unsustainable, creates massive structural violence, things like Afghanistan, etc., prove that American hegemony is not sustainable in the long run, proves that they inevitably have to upload a conflict which decreases legitimacy and turns their impacts, proves that our evidence also post-states their evidence, which should serve as a tiebreaker because it assumes like more conflicts than they do, proves that it's more comprehensive.
Okay, or B case, I guess. Okay.
Can you say a little bit more about where you're starting on the case at least?
Oh yeah, sorry. The advantage, like the circumvention stuff, like all that, then it'll be the deterrence flow. Okay. Is anybody not good? Okay, cool.
Extend the advantage. The public shock shocks themselves unsustainable commercial space development ensures action in outer space where private actors don't impede on the public good. That solves space situational space awareness, space security, resource wars, and debris, all of which culminate in nuclear power conflict extinction. Conceded the sort of resource war scenario, which is game over, does not rely on debris, says that in different states it's making conflicting resource conflicts in outer space. I say it's in claims on celestial bodies from the United States, conflicts with claims on celestial bodies from states like Russia. That was the one you see press evidence that culminates in international conflict and escalation right now because states have different perceptions of what they want. IPs to put their infrastructure on different celestial bodies and wouldn't allow it other states to sort of impede on those things, which causes massive escalation, which is an independent impactor, which means that debris doesn't assume it. Will the debate as to why debris and deterrence wasn't happen, but independently will win the debris scenario here. Debris does escalate. There's already hundreds of thousands of pieces of debris that are happening right now. There's sort of two in our thumper argument how the public sector thumps. One, you've conceded that this is small scale. Read the evidence. It literally says that it damaged a couple windows. Our argument is that massive amounts of debris and the prevention of the ability to maneuver around this debris is what causes situations because spacecrafts wouldn't be able to move around these arguments, which cause gigantic debris cascades. All of their two in our arguments as to why debris and deterrent scenarios will assume that we have infrastructure in the first place or things to protect. But if we're winning the debris cascade scenario, then it would mean that it's inevitable and we would not have the ability, even if they are right, that ASATs create deterrence in outer space. You've conceded its impact on Earth. Our scenario is not a space conflict, but rather that debris scenarios causes mass perception and miscalculation scenarios on Earth because states believes that someone else destroyed their entire infrastructure will automatically fire a preemptive first strike in order to kill them all, which one outweighs is because it instantaneously happens right when the satellite attack or sort of right when debris gets destroyed and satellites are destroyed, but their scenario relies on that thing happening in the first place, which means that the affirmative always outweighs in time frame the lines by line of the circumvention arguments. The issue with the two on the circumvention, it all assumes that you want a uniquely claim that says that states want to actually change the PTD and will exploit the malleability, even if it's true that the PTD is malleable. You've conceded our 1AC evidence and our 1-year arguments that states have mutual incentives to pursue sustainable uses of outer space. States like United States, Russia, etc., all their two in our arguments about how infrastructure and existential deterrence taboos exist in outer space are or reasons as to why they would be obliged to follow the plan, because they would not want all of their infrastructure in outer space to get destroyed at the same time and prevent any actual terms, which is a reason as to why their deterrence arguments are flip F and prove that there won't be any circumvention argument. All their 200 just said, repeated the words malleability a ton of times, but didn't read uniqueness as that China, Russia, etc. actually want to change the PTD, and the PAPOC evidence or the rehaling does not come anywhere close to this whatsoever. The 2 are sort of weighing debate on the deterrence debate. One is that if we're winning, the affirmative flips the internal link, then that means you automatically vote affirmative, means that we control the internal link to the infrastructure scenario. They say that it doesn't rely on infrastructure, it's just about general use. One, this is just not true. Your evidence assumes ASAT use or some sort of other scenario. Second is that your impact evidence assumes that we have read a scenario about space war, but that isn't our scenario. Our war is about escalation on Earth, not in outer space, which means that you don't even have an internal link to the impact turn or any way deterrence us to double bind. Either A, infrastructure gets destroyed, which means that you don't have an internal link, or infrastructure doesn't get destroyed, in which case you don't have an internal link to the impact turn either. So like either way, the AF controls the internal link, or they don't have an internal link to the impact, vote F. Even independently, the AF outweighs deterrence doesn't apply to Earth conflicts.
Good.
All right, that was the last one, so we'll all right. Congrats to both debaters for reaching the quarterfinals of the Harvard Law Sig tournament. Good debate. Decision was a 3-0 for the affirmative from Ayala. Since I'm talking, I guess I can go first. So first I'll start on the solvency circumvention part of the debate. I mean, like the 2AR feels like a little bit new here, but especially with regards to the China and Russia don't have an incentive to make the doctrine malleable. But I'm inclined to allow it, especially since like all the 1NC says is like infinite malleability ensures circumvention, doesn't even read the lines in the card. And I agree with the F that like the lines in the card don't say that anybody does have an incentive to change the doctrine. I think the rehighlighting is probably a little bit out of context if this is the argument you're trying to spin it from, because it's just like it can be changed to adopt new things, and perhaps people can change if they want to protect more resources or whatever. But like this like China and Russia revisionist means that they're going to change the doctrine thing. I don't find persuasive because I agree with the 2R explanation that it wouldn't be in their interest to do so. The public sector alt cost thing, I also agree small, and I don't think it answers the resource war scenario that the 2R goes for. So I think the 2R or the F has a pretty high risk of their impact in their scenario. The debris impact turn, 2 problems for me for the neg are: number one, I agree this doesn't answer the F scenario, which is about a conflict on Earth because of events in space, not a conflict in space. Second, I also agree that the F flips the internal link since debris cascades would make their impact inevitable. Big problem for me for this impact turn debate for the neg is like you don't do enough impact calc. I don't know if like outweighs is said a whole lot in the 2NR. You're just kind of like try or die for deterrence, but no real comparison to the app scenario, and also you don't have defense to the app scenario, which is not good for me. Think maybe the 1 and 2 would be better off going for like 1 or 2 of these scenarios and developing them more in depth and answering the case more sufficiently instead of reading all 5. Especially since your only answer to the case is like blitzing through these insertings of rehighlightings in the 1 and C, and then you just, like kind of forget about it. And like, I think you should call them out on these. I don't know what my colleagues think about inserting rehighlightings, but like, okay, maybe you can do it for the case, but like they insert a rehighlighting to get to the DDEV thing, and that they don't read a link to that. And it's, I think we should push back on this a little bit more and just be like, they have not answered my case. And at the very least say, I get new 2R explanation if they, when they expand on these in the 2NR. That's the conclusion of my thoughts.
Yeah, I can go next. I agree with everything that Vishal said. I think on the circumvention debate, I agree that the 2R response is, I think, sort of new, but I think it just points out that the 1 and C argument is incomplete because you haven't established a link that states want to circumvent the PTD. And then when the extent of the 1 and C explanation is just kind of like the words infinite malleability, I think that's sufficient. I think that the F wins that sustainable development solves space resource wars that culminate in terrestrial conflict, which is an internal link that's independent of all of the debris stuff. And I don't think that debris deterrence solves this because, again, that only prevents conflict in space. And I think there's a chance that infrastructure doesn't get destroyed, or infrastructure does get destroyed, which means that debris wouldn't function as a deterrent anyways. I echo all of Vishal's thoughts about how the 1AR should push back about the 1 and C's ability to just like insert rehighlightings. I don't know that I have like a paradigmatic stance. It's just like rehighlight or insertions of rehighlightings are never allowed, but I did think like the 1 and C's execution of that like made me think that it was a little like you should be reading these lines, not just inserting them.
Yeah, I guess I don't have a whole lot to add. I thought EF was winning that a resource conflict over outer space would escalate on Earth prior to your impact scenario, or that the initial takeout of a satellite would cause war because there wouldn't be enough debris to create deterrence yet.
What do you think a winning 2NR looks like?
I mean, I think that a winning 2NR would have, and this obviously presupposes things that happen in the 1 and C, but like you need impact defense to the scenarios that the app extends, like impact calc about deterrence that explains why it is an impact that we should care more about than resource wars. And then maybe, like, I think if the 1NC perhaps had, I think like circumvention was probably the area of the debate that I thought most about and like actually considered voting neg in. So I think had the 2NR just said like the 1AR had an opportunity to point out that this was, or like the 1AR just concedes. Yeah, I think if the 2NR had just made more arguments preempting a 2AR pivot on circumvention, that would have been persuasive too.
I think the impact defense isn't entirely a lost cause for you in resource wars. Your second card on the water turn has some game on resource conflict being inevitable and scarcity creating cooperation, not war, that defuses conflict. I think that you probably could have leveraged this on the resource wars impact. I don't think the 1AR like particularly dealt with this specific card either. They just sort of like went for broader kickouts to this scenario. So this probably could have functioned as impact to the scenario they went for and given you some leverage for impact calc.
I agree with the stuff about circumvention, but also I think probably hegemony is your best one of these impact turns, just both in terms of like the quality of the actual argument and also based on the 1AR responses. Like they read kind of old Ev and, you know, not really responsive to what you're saying. But I do think that if you don't answer this like satellite cascades, all the satellites gone, nobody has early warning, then you're pretty doomed on that front. So I'd say include like better ones impact defense to that.
I don't have any questions. Thanks for judging, everybody. Good
Yeah.
round for us.
Good debate.
Good day, y'all.